Nikki.
Hey, Selena.
And hey, everyone.
Hey, y'all.
Oh, look at you. Look, it only took us 22 episodes.
Right here at the end. That's why we want you to stick around. You never know what's going to come up.
Right, like a southern accent for Nikki. So
I've been hiding it all season.
all season long. And here we are. The end.
The end.
The finale.
The finale.
22 episodes.
I think if I weren't so tired, I would be sad.
Yeah, exhaustion has kept me from being sad a lot.
Yeah.
Like in life. So
it's a defense mechanism.
Right. 3 cheers for sadness. I mean, tiredness. I mean, what emotion are we feeling? I don't even know because my emotions were all over the map for this one. So, before we hop into the episode, I thought let's start on a lighter note.
Okay, I like it.
Okay, so along the way in this journey, as long as we've known each other, like over a decade, okay, there are still some things that I'm learning about you along the way.
Okay.
And so I have a proposal. Okay.
Selena, I'm already married.
Me too. So we're not in Utah. There's a lot of things, okay? But what I was going to say was my proposal is that your pick, if you're open to this, but we've been named a lot of references of things that you haven't seen.
Uh-huh.
So out of all the things that we haven't seen, you don't have to do this right now.
Okay.
I'd like us to pick one of your choice. Let's see how many ways I can say this. I'm scared to say it. Watch it, and then let's come back and talk about it.
Pretty Woman.
Okay, well that was easy.
But I don't know the full list. Is
Fine.
there another movie I should watch instead of that one?
Well,
I'm not going to watch
little kid movies, so I think
I'm considering Anne of Green Gables because it just means so much to you. It just means so darn much.
Right.
I'm not going to watch Shirley Temple.
That's understandable.
It's just not going to happen.
Okay.
Pretty Woman.
Okay. Yeah.
It's decided.
Let's do Pretty Woman.
Okay.
We can talk further offline about Anne of Green Gables. So.
Maybe we can end next season, and that'll be the one I watch.
All right. Okay. Well, perfect. So all that as a high note, you heard it right here, y'all. She said she's going to do it. She's going to watch the movie that every other human being on the face of the planet has seen, Pretty Woman. And then we're going to find out what does a 36-year-old in 2021 think about a 1990-91 movie about a prostitute. So
it sounds like a good time.
Yeah, come back. And we will figure it out.
More to come.
So, episode 22, Bachelor Suite. You want to take this away?
Sure. Before we go too far, though, Selena, I want to address one thing. Trigger warnings weren't really a thing when this show was made in 1987, but they are today. So I want to just say at the top, we want to say at the top that this episode highlights sexual assault and harassment, and it could be really triggering for some people. So if that's you, stop. Go find something that feels safer and healthier for your heart and your mind and come back next week. We want you here, but we don't want you hurt. So this is your trigger warning. Step away. No hard feelings. We'll be back with something different next time.
Thank you, Nikki. That's of the utmost importance.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So on to our episode description. You said Bachelor Suite. Sexual harassment becomes the order of the day when Mary Jo is subjected to special attention and pressure from a wealthy client. The air date was May 11th, 1987.
Okay, one note right off the top. Terrible description.
Really awful. Really, but I think it plays into some other thoughts I have as the show goes on.
Ooh, well, I can't wait to hear those.
Maybe.
Also, just want to say that this was 2 days shy of my second birthday. So,
Aww,
and
perfect.
May 11th is my godmother's birthday. So, oh, look at this. Sherry, I talked about you last episode. It's really your day, maybe. I don't know. Okay, I'll shut up now. Go ahead.
So this one was written by LBT, and it was directed by Jack Shea. The first act covers a lot of ground. So we open with a cold open that has kind of a cute Charlene moment. We learn about a difficult client that Mary Jo's dealing with. Spoiler alert, I think we know this guy. I think he comes from elsewhere. And then we meet said client, and we see firsthand what's making him so hard to work with and for. Spoiler alert number 2, he's an entitled predator.
Predator. That's a really good word.
That's what it is. So we open with Charlene. She's lip syncing and dancing to a song at her desk, but not just any song. It's Sleeping Single in a Double Bed by Barbara Mandrell. If that name's not familiar, go back to Extra Sugar episode 17. We got you, bro. It's there. So she's singing into a magic marker. Suzanne comes in and tells her to knock it off. There's no payoff here. We just covered this, I think, in the last episode, that maybe I expect more of cold opens than there are. There's no payoff here, right?
Could the payoff be similar to me asking you to watch Pretty Woman
Yes,
at the top
right.
of this?
Fair.
Yeah, maybe we just needed to not want to cry in a corner the entire episode, and maybe that's it. Although I actually really did feel close to Charlene in this moment, because not this close since when she said she ate a pie.
Oh, the one pie and the whole pie in one sitting.
Mm-hmm. Because I am definitely a lip syncer. This is definitely in a dancer. I mean, I don't dance, and I'm no good, but I will do it.
Yeah.
And especially in a working situation, it calms me down. So
takes the pressure off.
I just want to dance. so I was like really feeling Charlene here.
I feel like if they could take this Charlene from the cold open and replace the other Charlene from the rest of this episode with that Charlene, I would have appreciated that more, because I was very disappointed with her as the episode went on, and I can get into that more later.
Right.
So Susan tells her, knock it off, that's annoying. And Charlene's like, what are you talking about? I'm not doing anything. So then Julia shows up. Suzanne's turned her back. Charlene's doing it again behind Suzanne's back. Julia shows up and catches her doing it. And it's here that they reveal that Mary Jo is with their client, hence Winchester, and that Julia hates him. You gave me a knowing look earlier. Do you know how we know hints?
I do. Do you want me to break that?
Go for it,
Okay.
Selena.
So basically, we had an entire conversation back around episode 10, the slumber party, where like this is the last time he was mentioned. And I mean, it's hard to forget a name like Hence Winchester. What's funny about our conversation at that time is we were like, what was the payoff for this?
Right.
Why are we even talking about this guy? He's got a waterfall in his bedroom or something. I mean, we kind of get the idea he's kind of an icky guy from that episode, but we didn't really have anything else. That was episode 10. We are now at 22. We have not heard even like the briefest mention of this man.
Yep.
So
can I add an addendum to that,
please.
though? He was actually Westchester instead of Winchester. I went back and rewatched it to listen carefully, because that conversation we had, you said, what is he, a maker of guns? And Winchester was a maker of guns. But I had read it and heard it as Westchester at that time, but I just went on with it. And so this time I was like, wait, I got to know. I think they changed this man's name.
That is so weird. Why would you do that?
I don't know.
Huh.
But I do think that this supports the theory. Did you ever hear, Selena, that these episodes aired out of order?
Well, no, I didn't hear they aired out of order, but I heard that they took the episodes and they put them in a different order.
Right.
So this should have followed 10.
In my mind, it should
Maybe
have followed
one
10.
more.
Right. Because they say at some point in this episode, there's like a week time period between something that was mentioned in episode 10, the slumber party episode, and this episode. Something to do with the waterfall in the shower or something like that. They say, like, and a week ago he wanted a waterfall in the shower. So they should have aired very closely together.
Yeah, I hope I don't want to steal any thunder from you walking us through this part of the episode, but the other thing that like makes the timeline shaky is Charlene makes a comment to Mary Jo about it being time to consummate the relationship with JD, but that happened halfway through the season.
Yep.
We've moved past that. Another timeline thing, maybe this is what you're referring to, I'm not sure, but Mary Jo mentions that Hence moved in 5 days ago.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So certainly more time has passed than that.
Yes.
For half an episode or season in episodes.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. The only thing before we get to that part about Mary Jo's date with JD, which comes up later in the consummating the relationship and whatever, there's like some. So Julia's bothered by his design choices. This is why I say she really doesn't like him. She's bothered by design choices. She mentions a fur waterbed and a bumper sticker that says, quote, these are her words, no fat chicks. So this precipitates a conversation in which Suzanne shares a story about them being at a wedding next to each other. And Mardell Richardson, or Mardell, I'm not sure, chose a full gown and a white veil. And poor Mardell has a little bit of a weight issue. So Julia had apparently made some really tacky comments about her. And again, there's no real payoff here except to like talk about the fact that, again, Julia's just really darn mean sometimes.
Well, this is back-to-back episodes.
Right. Yeah.
So where she's done this, and then obviously
Just an
this has
a-hole.
sort of been a... Well, we could just stop there. She's an a-hole. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us for the first season of... No. But yeah, no, absolutely. This is a pattern of behavior that we're seeing with Julia. We learned something else about Hintz, though, that feels kind of important, which is that he's one of the most successful contractors in Atlanta, and he can get them a lot of business.
Yes.
So they're definitely anxious to keep said business.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I think some of them are anxious to keep the business. Some of them would love to keep the business, but if he keeps being a jerk, they're not so sure they want to.
Yeah, and that's really running the gamut across all of our designing women.
So then Mary Jo scrambles in, and this is where we get into the real meat of the episode. So again, she brings up a couple of questionable design choices he's making. Seems to make for good laughs between Mary Jo and the workmen. But then it makes everyone blush when they realize these are things that are really going to be used in his real life. So a 2,000-pound mirror suspended from above his bed.
I would never trust that. I realize that's not the point. That's not the point.
Sure hope they found the stud when they hung it up there.
And it's so, I'm just like pragmatic and like just not in
I'm not
the
looking
same
to die that
mode.
way.
Yeah, what a horrible, gruesome death. I've seen Ghost. Nikki hasn't.
I have many a time.
Wait, but have you really?
Yes.
Oh,
I love that movie.
Okay. Well, he gets the at the...
Yeah.
Is it too early for a 1991 spoiler alert? I don't know.
Too soon.
How dare me? Yeah, but so we are getting those jokes, and I think they're trying... I think they have a tall order here in this episode to keep things light, but also the episode gets more serious as we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
That's okay. No, then next thing we learn is that Hentz is going to come pick Mary Jo up. She's got some tile samples for him to test out. But she's running late. All of this has made her run late through her day, so she wants Charlene to call JD and tell him she's going to be late for their date. So because Charlene's involved at this point, we're back to talking about Mary Jo and JD not having had sex, which, as you mentioned earlier, was a really big deal in episodes 12 and 13.
Just the whole time we were talking about it.
Just the whole time. So this is when Mary Jo drops that JD is really upset because she just slipped and let him know that she thinks Hentz has been sexually harassing her, and that's been causing some friction. Julia says, like, you never told us this.
Right.
And Mary Jo says, like, well, I didn't know if it was real, if I was imagining it. So it's just things like he taps me on my shoulder to tell me things. And they're like, okay, everybody does that. And she's like, but sometimes he misses and like hits her breasts is the presumption.
And I don't want to, this is not to correct you. I just thought that behavior in the first place was aggressive. And it wasn't a shoulder tap, it was a chest tap.
Okay, maybe you're right.
And I'm only saying that because it feels like I would feel like it would.
It's commanding.
I would not feel, I would be kind of ticked off if someone pointed and wanted to touch me on my chest anyway.
That's
not breasts, chest.
That's a super good clarification because the other part that's important about it is how close you have to be to someone to do that.
Pretty close.
So in the first place, he's already in her personal space. He's also brushed up against her, and she sort of makes this movement like it's his front pieces that have done it. And she's had to tell him, get your right hand off my left bun.
I'm sorry.
Do you hear me? You just heard me say his front pieces.
That sounds hot.
So yeah, she's had to tell him, get your right hand off my left bun.
Yeah, which is pretty clear by then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of ambiguity in the old bun touching.
Right. So this is where I get really bothered by Charlene. She is through this whole scene, is like enthralled by the drama of all this. She's acting like it's entertaining. Like Mary Jo says, I think it was when she said he's gone to tap her chest, and Charlene's like, oh, I've seen people do that. And then he's brushed up against her and she's like, no, he hasn't. Like the way you would do with your girlfriends if they said like, he sent me a text message and asked me out to dinner. And you'd be like, no way, he didn't do that. But in this instance, like he's sexually harassing her. And Charlene's acting like it's this entertaining thing to watch.
And I mean, I'm wondering if some of this again is, in addition to the episodes airing out of order, is this maybe because it's airing in 1987? Or is this behavior that we would still see from colleagues today? Mm-hmm. And that is really an open question because I don't think there is an answer. Yeah, is what I would say. Or it would be a really complicated one that this is a recap, not a dissertation. So I think there's a lot of things that you could come away with from this part of the episode. So you were focusing on Charlene. Any guesses who I was focusing on?
Julia?
Suzanne.
Dang it, that was my second guess.
Well, there was only so many guesses. But she says, you people are getting all excited just because some guy gave Mary Jo a little love pat. Men do that sort of thing all the time. That is problematic for me. And I'm not saying that's not true, depending on, for some women today, that might very well be baked into your personal experience. Mm-hmm. As someone who worked in restaurants for 7 years, as someone who's bartended and been down that road, I never had to deal with a whole lot, but definitely there's comments and things and, somebody would have lost a hand if there had been an inappropriate touch.
I love pats too far.
And even calling it a love pat.
For sure.
Is like, there's something to that.
If you don't know me, you don't love me. So you're not entitled to pat me with love.
Or with anything. Don't
right.
pat me with anything that you have.
None of your front parts, none of your back parts.
Pieces, I believe it is. So I think that was just really bothersome to me. And then the other thing that I got a hint of flavor for here was there's some tension between JD and Mary Jo over this guy.
Well, JD's mad. He's sexually harassing you and you're still going to work?
Yeah, which we'll jump into in the next act. But absolutely. And it's, again, I think we've gone back and forth over JD and how we feel about him. So
yeah,
here we go.
So we finally get to meet Hintz. And I can say, I've not gone back and forth on how I feel about him. I don't like him.
Oh, you don't like him?
I don't like this guy. Mm-hmm. First of all, he's late to pick up Mary Jo, which is just offensive. That's just rude. But he had to drop, quote unquote, someone off. And so he's late. At any rate, he compliments all the women.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah, they're very aggressive compliments. And some of them are taken with him. Suzanne and Charlene are gaga.
They're all about it. I don't get it.
They just are charmed by him. He compliments Charlene and says, I didn't know the decor was so attractive around here. Mm-hmm. He goes to Suzanne. Because she's a thing. Because she's like a vase, a very pretty vase. Mm-hmm. So he goes to Suzanne and says, don't we have friends in common? I'm just not sure how I could have missed you. Isn't that actor like super creepy?
Okay. He's holding her hand at this point, and he's stroking it. Mm. And I do mean stroking it. Mm. And it is just creepy as hell.
Especially knowing what Mary Jo is going through with him.
Remember how I've said before, I don't think we should talk about actors and their looks?
Yes. Are we about to break that rule? Uh-huh. Okay.
I only say that because there was something about, he said, I should have written down what it was, but he reminds me of a young Mr. Smithers.
From The Simpsons. Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, hey, we don't know that Mr. Smithers wasn't an attractive man when he was younger. It's not up to me to say, but, like, can't you just see him, like, doing that thing with his hands and, like, there's, like, a whole... yes, he has. Just, I don't know. There was just something about it, and I just had to share.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to watch it again with new eyes.
I don't know. I don't like it.
So he does this to the other women and then says, like, we're going to leave. And on the way out the door, Julia tries to set boundaries, just like she did in Scenes from a Marriage, episode 20. Mm-hmm. And I think she was just as effective. So remember in episode 20, she ended up with a horse she said she wasn't going to take. Hintz smacks her behind, her buns, if you will.
He does.
And she says, he shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. I keep a little list of people who pat my behind without my permission, and several of them have died unnatural and untimely deaths.
It's wonderful. Did you see Suzanne's face at this moment?
Yes.
Her face was so good.
It switched. So,
Yes, I think we were seeing Delta.
oh,
Because I don't think that the dialogue matched up as well.
good point.
She may have been on the verge of breaking.
Oh, good points. Because when she said he shouldn't have done that, they flashed to her face and she was like, he shouldn't have. And then when they flashed back the next time, she was making a face like, you're taking this way too seriously. Calm down. He's just being a romantic.
So
That is
romantic.
such a good point, Selena. That may have been true.
Well, it just came to me in the second.
But this was such an important reminder that Julia had so much bark, but so little bite. Because she like came real strong. Like, we want to keep this business. This is all business. I hope we understand each other. And she's just sure she's being clear. And then he pats her behind. She's very tersely worded. She thinks she's saying something that's very clear and persuasive.
Well, let's think about the two things, the incidents that it's been. I mean, let's go deep.
Let's do it.
Okay, so
We're already here.
First thing is that the last time she was ineffective was with the Tates in episode 20. And the Tates are very wealthy. So there's a power imbalance there, right? And now, again, she's dealing with another wealthy client who's a man and, like you said, a predator. And we have a serious power imbalance. There was no mincing of words with the beauty pageant lady. There was no mincing of words with the woman who
Reese's friend.
With Reese's friend. Like, I think her bark was equal to what her bite would have been with those two.
I gotcha.
So I just wonder if in these situations, like, it has undercut her ability. Because even a strong woman like Julia can have her feet taken out from underneath her when there is that much of a imbalance.
You're bringing me along with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. Suzanne and Charlene try to take up for him again. That's just his way of being social. He's just a real nice guy.
Yeah. So I wanted to take a brief second to talk about that. So I started looking up for this week's Extra Sugar. I was running across all kinds of things that made me sad all week. Wonderful. And one thing that I ran across was an article on rape culture. And I mean, I don't even like to say the word. Okay, it's just terrible. But anyways, this is considered trivializing rape culture or a boys will be boys mentality. I've seen this a lot in my life. And still today, I usually see it from older women, particularly women in my grandparents' age range. I'm not I don't want to like broad brush that because that's obviously, you know who else is in my grandma's age range? Gloria Steinem. So I'm guessing Gloria Steinem doesn't often walk around talking about, well, boys will be boys. You know, I'm guessing Jane Fonda doesn't either. So, but you know what I'm saying? I just think some of this is sort of slowly but surely going away. But I think this is very much so part of the culture.
And I think it's realistic. I appreciate that they introduced that perspective because if all the women had been super miffed about the whole thing the whole time, we wouldn't have had a show here. We wouldn't have had a chance to talk about sexual harassment and sexual assault on a national program, a 30-minute sitcom in the 80s. We needed that perspective because that's what added a little bit of friction.
And we lose Julia. She comes in and she comes out on being our voice of reason. Yeah. But here she's our voice of reason again. And she calls them out for not caring about what this guy is putting Mary Jo through.
Right. So Mary Jo comes rushing back in. This is where this part of the episode is going to end because she comes back running in and says, that's it. No one has that much trouble finding the stick shift. And she pulls her skirt open and he has ripped her skirt in the front. About halfway up. It's just totally ripped. And everyone laughs, except it's not really funny.
What a weird place to put in a laugh line. I think
so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we spend most of the episode doing a nice job balancing between this really serious message and the fact we have to remember this is a sitcom. But I think that was one place where we may have missed the mark.
They started laughing. I was like, wait a minute, what?
And then I wonder, too, like, you know, there's the uncomfortable laughing. We've done it before. We're, like, talking about a serious episode. We have to be like, hey, guys, especially since people can't see us.
Right.
We're laughing right now because we're uncomfortable.
We're sweating a little bit.
Yeah, not because we think it's awesome.
So hilarious.
Right. And maybe that's what was happening.
It didn't sound that.
Oh, I guess I was thinking for the audience.
Yeah, but it didn't sound uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's true.
Anywho, her skirt was ripped open and hence is a
Look,
jerk.
I just did it. And Mary Jo's day doesn't get better.
Mm-mm.
I think this is something, honestly, just off the top, I want to say feels accurate. What we are really seeing is this Hintz character is affecting every aspect of her life.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay at work. It's going to come home with her.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it comes home literally into her house. Her and JD are supposed to have a romantic evening together. But we have a couple of interruptions that happen first.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that his kids are there at the door when she goes to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually just kind of cute, I think. He's got all the kids with him, and Janet, his wife, has apparently done this thing where she pretends to have a mix-up in the schedule. Oops, you got to watch the 3 kids tonight. Apparently, this typically happens to coincide with dates of his.
It also probably would have happened around episode 12, 13, where they talked about this at length.
Absolutely. So we know that we're seeing this kind of hiccup in time that we're just going to ignore.
Nope, we're not. I'm going to talk about it every single time.
We're not. We're not ignoring anything. But I guess they thought at the time, hey, a week's passed. Who cares? They're not going to notice that these 2 people are obviously dating for the first time, since he's clearly talking about dating other women.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm like, how many people's has he brought around, or how many people's has he brought around? Because the kid says something like, oh, we see him do it all the time.
It's okay. We're used to it. I wrote that down too because I thought that was so strange. You mean when Hannah said that in front of her brothers, Rex and Bert?
I didn't even notice the kids' names.
They're weird kids' names. Hannah's adorable. I have a little friend named Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Rex and Bert. Seem like strange kids' names. Carry on.
One thing I was also surprised with here is that the kids open up to her so immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. These are just things that hit me. It's not really important to the plot necessarily, especially since we're just pretending like all these people don't know each other by this
But
point.
if these kids have met like a woman every night, which it sounds like they have, a different woman every night, then they probably just are really open now.
And to me, this is a plot hole.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what we find out from JD in episode 5, when they first start dating, is that he acted kind of like a jerk in their first date, but it's because he was trying to put on airs because he hasn't dated a lot.
Oh, right.
Here it sounds like he has maybe had a little bit more experience since he's been divorced, and so
I don't like it.
We'll let it go. Whatever the case is, they were going to be having duck à l'orange. Now I made that sound way fancier. I put some extra stuff in there. But anyways, and now what they're really going to be doing is having hot dogs with the kids. It sounds glorious to me.
Sounds like a darn delight.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But anyways, time passes. We kind of do one of those little quick scene cuts. So basically went to a commercial and came back. Mm-hmm. And the kids have gone upstairs. They're downstairs. And they start talking about hints.
Right.
And one thing that's really clear off the bat to me is she is making it clear over and over again she does not want to talk about this.
Yes.
Which I think is very true to Mary Jo's character.
Mm-hmm.
But then the phone rings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's already gotten tense between JD and Mary Jo.
Awkward.
And it's going to get worse because who's on the line?
It's Hints, man.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we don't hear his side of the conversation. We only hear hers. But he's definitely apologizing. He's already apologized. Mm-hmm. One thing that we did learn that I didn't mention is she's quit the job.
Oh.
That's what she tells JD.
Yeah.
She's like, this is done. So this is like him trying to get her to come back.
Right.
And then he has sent flowers that show up at the door.
A lot of them.
Yeah, about, I don't know, like 24 roses or something.
Seems right.
It's not in HD, guys, so it could be a daisy, a rose.
I have 24 written down, so we're going to go with that.
Right. It's a lot of flowers.
It's a lot.
And JD is the one who's getting them from the door. He seems very annoyed. And apparently we also learned that Hintz is crying on the phone. He's making a lot of excuses for what happened. Apparently his dog died.
That's very traumatic.
She's never seen him with a dog.
Right.
And all this time that they've been together, but his dog died. He's really upset. And once he gets off the phone, she basically comes around to the fact that she is going to continue the job. And JD gives her an ultimatum. And
He's kind of the king of those, isn't he?
a little bit.
When things don't go his way, he just threatens people.
But it's okay. He gives them Braves hats.
Right.
And I want to talk about JD's reaction and how he acts. But before we do that, I just want to carry it on through. He gets really ticked. He leaves. And there's like a haha funny bit. He forgets the kids because he's so angry. And he just heads on out. And that's pretty much where everything...
And he takes his Braves hat back.
He did. Really? That is so something. I don't want your hat in the first place. I already have 7 from the last mistakes you made. But anyways, and that's pretty much where things end. But I just wanted to come back and talk about some of the specific actions that he takes. But I don't want to sit here and just yappity yap yap yap. What do we have, a podcast or something? Do you want to say anything?
I'm sure what you're going to say is similar to what I want to say. There was some major victim shaming in there by JD. There's just a lot of like, he's doing all this to you and you're still going to go back, and it just kind of ignoring the fact that there are financial implications to them dropping this job. We've talked a few times throughout the episode that the business is not doing that well. You mentioned a few minutes ago that this dude could get them a lot of business. So it's not so easy for Mary Jo to just walk away from that paycheck. So that's thing one.
She's a single mother.
Right. So that bothered me a lot. I do imagine, though, to put myself in JD's shoes, that has to be a little frustrating to watch as well.
Yeah, I don't want to take away from the fact that it's a tough for everyone. There's only one person in this entire scenario that it's not tough for, and he sent 2 dozen roses, and he's a piece of crap sitting over somewhere else in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying?
Also not real.
But I can get just as mad as if he was. I will go there. But yeah, so I don't want to take that away from JD, but I do want to say that I felt like he was being a little condescending. He calls her gullible, even though he says it jokingly. He says, "Oh, he can't sleep with her now. He'll be a hill."
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think the other thing that bothers me about that is there is a long history that goes along with women being sexually assaulted, and then suddenly you're ruined.
Yeah.
So to make light of that, it
Yeah.
is not light. It's super heavy. So I didn't appreciate that. And then I think some of what's coming to the surface here too is like, it's not necessarily about Mary Jo.
Right.
It's about hints. And
Right.
even him thinking she's available. He
That
says
was
it.
so weird to me. That has nothing to do with the fact that she feels helpless and she feels against the rope. So I just said a second ago, it must be frustrating to watch that happen, to feel like she has some control over this situation, but she's not exercising that control. I want to give him that credit. But then he doesn't acknowledge that she feels a little bit helpless. He doesn't say, God, this must be hard on you. Let me help you find more business so you don't feel like you have to take this and you don't feel like you're against the ropes. This is about him not wanting to feel like less of a man because another man is trying to take advantage of his woman.
Yes. But he like tries to put on airs like it's not that, but it clearly is that.
Right.
And I think the other thing that really bothered me is, in addition to the condescending thing, he also comes over while she's on the phone and tries to take it from her.
Like he's going to fix it.
But like she's a child.
Yeah.
Because you see, and it's like, okay, if you did not grow up with a landline, you don't know that maybe occasionally something happened in your life where a parent may have come over and said, "Give me the phone, just give me the phone." Give it to
That
me.
never happened to me.
Right. And so I'm suddenly like 10 again. My mom's trying to take the phone because she's trying to, and I'm in over my head. Telemarketer, I don't know, but like whatever the case is, and that's what it felt like to me.
You just bought a box of encyclopedias.
Idiot. But like Mary Jo is like not a child, and I think again she's like trying to assert herself, and he's trying to assert himself. We're just having a little bit of a mix-up. So
Sure.
we're having a lot of mix-up, and so I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't care. I think I've said a few times my feelings are mixed on JD. And this was one where I felt like, and the end of the episode comes around to this too. It wasn't about Mary Jo, and it wasn't about what made her comfortable. It was about what made him comfortable. And he wanted to be the hero here. He wanted to be the one that stepped in and saved it so that it didn't affect his reputation or manhood or whatever you want to call it. And that was just an ugly feeling in an episode that should have been all about what Mary Jo was going through.
But it's going to be a really good lead up to our final act.
So I'm going to call this last act. Well, that escalated quickly. Because it was about this point in the episode that I was a little bit enraged, I was a little bit bored, and I was kind of ready for this to be over. But here we learn that Hence really is a real a-hole. He's a real piece of work. And we find out all the reasons why Mary Jo has been concerned about him. We can finally see it. And it escalates real fast. So we start with a transition at Sugar Baker's where we learn that against the advice of Julia, Mary Jo has indeed gone back to finish the job. Suzanne's on the phone, and it seems like it's with someone who's vouching for Hence.
Yeah, I guess so, because that kind of blew over my head. But we also, Nikki and I talked about this. Well, we didn't talk about it, but we threw it in some document that we share.
That I may or may not have read.
You guys don't need to know the inner workings of this, but there is some missing script here.
Yeah, there is. And it's kind of important, I think.
I think so too.
So I think it's Julia who makes some comments to acknowledge how nuanced sexual assault can be, especially for women who don't want to make it like a whole thing. So she says, well, some women, so she has said she's a little bit worried about Mary Jo because, she can be so polite. She says, well, some women are so well-mannered and easily intimidated that if a man they know comes on to them, they're afraid of causing trouble. It's just not as cut and dry as being attacked by a stranger. And that's true.
I do agree. Some of it feels like a tinge problematic because it just sort of already sets women up in this like docile, subservient kind of thing. I know, I understand the intention behind it, but I can also understand how someone in 2021 looked at those lines and said, maybe not.
I don't know. I actually was a little bothered they cut this because I think that, I think it's still true. I think it's very true. I think many women you talk to would say that in a professional environment, maybe in a personal environment with a friend's husband or boyfriend, I think a lot of women would say, I just am not sure. Was that inappropriate?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's the easily intimidated that bothers
Some
me.
women are.
And some people are, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's kind of getting like slapped and like specifically to women. I don't know that it's just women who are that way, but I definitely see it. And if we're going to talk about the Southern angle,
Yeah.
And I don't know necessarily, at least in the era when you and I were brought up, I feel like I can say with certainty that, you were just expected to act a certain way. You were expected to be a young lady and these kinds of things. So I don't know if that's continued on today. I can't speak to that, but I can speak to my upbringing. And so I do think for those reasons that it could be challenging for someone to assert themselves when that's sort of baked into the whole experience of being brought up.
Right. And in this missing script as well, Charlene shares a story about how she ended up on a bus next to a man near Fort Benning, which is a military fort. We can talk about that later, but here in Georgia. But he ended up, she was on the bus next to him feeling a little uncomfortable. That radar was going off, that something just wasn't right. And then she kept questioning herself because she sort of felt bad. She's like, why am I assuming this about this person? I know nothing about him. So she drifts off to sleep. And when she wakes up, he's going through her suitcase and putting her bra on his head. Yeah. So there was something a little perverse about this person.
At the very least, the man had boundary issues.
Yeah. So it's not quite the same case, but it's really close. And really that story is like the best case scenario of what could have come out of that.
Yeah.
Because where I thought it was going as I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, is she about to reveal that she was raped and they just totally left it out of this story?
Right.
Like how easily could he have molested her?
And it turned out to be almost like an important moment that was cut, but also they used it as a moment of levity, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they cut the whole thing out, so.
Right, so we didn't see any of this. Is there anything else about those cut lines that you wanted to mention?
Only the fact that Suzanne, I think, continues to double down on, she doesn't understand what everybody's problem is. In this, to your point about her being on the phone and getting a voucher, a coupon. She's on the phone with Marcy, which is their in common friend that we hear about at the top.
Yeah.
And she's saying he's a nice guy. And the other part we get here is like, he's never been turned down before.
Right.
Or something like that we know of.
Right.
We don't know that.
Right. That's our big assumption.
Anyway.
So this is where it gets really real.
Mm.
So it opens up, and Mary Jo has gone to Hence's place to finish up tile design in the bathroom. When she gets there, he lures her into his master bedroom on the pretext of seeing the tile in the bathroom. Like, we can't make these decisions unless we're in the bathroom.
And you can see that discomfort, right? I also want to mention something here. Because there's a lot of things happen really fast, as you say, that escalate quickly. Before then, this is going to sound like a little in the weeds, but go with me. He comes out and he's in a very short silk robe.
Very short robe.
Why is it so short?
It's so funny. My notes say, and he comes out in a robe, like a small one.
like a lady's robe.
It's like a bath mat.
Yeah. So there's that. But what is she wearing? I would call it. Now, I only got this because...
Was it Mary Jo chic? From here to...
This is tough,
from
right?
neck to
because
toes.
she is a little bit of a... I can't even think of the word right now, but like, there's not a lot of... She doesn't have a lot of things hanging out.
Very modest.
Thank you.
Very Victorian, if you will.
Yes. But along with this scene, her wardrobe escalated. She is in a potato sack jacket and very baggy pants.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I did not realize until my third watch of this that she was dressed. I think it's because everything else kind of takes your attention off her through the rest of the scene.
Right.
She came in here in her own type of armor.
Oh.
And her armor was to cover up anything that might be attractive to him.
Oh, that's so sad.
Now, these are guesses on my part.
Right.
But anyways, so continue.
So, yeah, he tells her, like, just chill on the bed while he finishes getting ready, and he comes out in that really tiny robe. First, he tries to get her to dance, right? He says, let's dance. There's some light music playing. And she says, no, man, we had a deal. We had a deal. You said you would let me come over here and just do my freaking job. Do what you're paying me to do. And he says, forget the deal. Forget the deal. Let's just get to know one another. And he tries to get her on the bed, and let's just sit here and talk to one another.
Try out the mattress.
Try out the mattress. Let's give it a go. She says, no, I'm not comfortable with that.
One important thing happens before then that I did not realize because everything happens so quickly.
It really did.
He locks the door.
Right.
Before almost all of this conversation.
Yeah.
He walks over and locks the door with a key that he then proceeds to put in his incredibly short robe pocket.
Because it has the pocket.
I don't even know how it's long enough to... Yeah, how is it long enough for a pocket? But
crazy.
So he puts that key in his pocket. If that is not bizarre anyway, I mean, since when do we have a turnkey lock master bedroom?
Oh, yeah.
It's concerning to me.
Oh, good point. Well, yeah.
But, I mean, the whole thing's concerning, right?
Right.
Here comes some of that uncomfortable laughter.
Right. He tries to get her in the bathtub, this one that she has installed, that she's overseen the installation of. He wants her to get in. He'll get her some booze, let her just kind of relax.
Yeah, sure, have 4 or 5 drinks.
Like Selena says, a lot's happening. I'll just pause and say, like, the amount of privilege here is gross. Like, the amount of presumption that he has that, like, you want to be here with me. You want to do this. You just don't know you want this. It just, I'm going to, first, we're going to try to see what your button is. Like, what's the thing that turns you on? Is it dancing? Do you like dancing? Oh, you don't? Okay, cool. Is it laying down in bed? Is that it? No? Okay, cool. Let's move to the bathtub. Is it that? And she's just progressively saying, no, 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 no. He locks the door and she says, you know what you are, man? You're a rapist. And, they end up on the bed. He picks her up, physically picks her up, slams her on the bed and says, like, know your role, basically. Like, know your place. You're going to do it with me right now. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. One thing that was said, too, is because she asked for the key. And he says, I'll give you what you want
yep.
if you give me what I want.
Yep.
Or maybe the reverse of that. But, so, like, he's basically saying, you put out, and then I'll let you out of this door.
So he puts her on the bed, physically muscles her onto the bed. She has to freaking knock him out. And this is where, like, I'm watching the episode so far and I'm like, God, this sucks. This is horrible. What just happened? What just happened? She grabs a vase or something and smashes it on his head.
Well, because she had already gotten tough with him. She said she's not one of these women in the movies who gets strangled in 9 seconds. So good for her.
Right.
I also just want to say that her saying what she does to look at him and say, that you know what you are, you're a rapist. I'm getting chills right now just talking about that. I
Yeah.
can't even recall. Now, rape is something that is on television a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is a plot device a lot. I mean, SVU is that it should just be rape UV or whatever. Anyways, I mean that it's just all the time.
Right.
Okay, so that was one of the most pointed exchanges I can
Mm-hmm.
recall from
Mm-hmm.
a very long history of television watching. So I actually thought that was pretty groundbreaking. And I thought it was also something LBT, I think, is making a counterpoint to Suzanne and Charlene because Suzanne and Charlene in the beginning are very over, like, come with his good looks.
Right.
And she says, "What do you think? Just because you look like Robert Redford, it isn't rape?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, like, that was a really subtle way to not call Suzanne and Charlene out, but just to say, like, you can be good looking and you can still sexually assault someone.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting as well.
So after she knocks him out, she has to uncomfortably, I imagine it was incredibly uncomfortable, get the key out of this very tiny postage stamp of a robe. And she runs to the door with the key because simultaneously JD is knocking on the door and yelling for her. So the second she opens the door, she crumples into his arms and he heads over to check in on Hints. Not in a good way. He's not going to make sure he's still alive. He's going over there because he wants to handle this situation. He doesn't think Mary Jo has done good enough.
Well, yes, I also felt like I think this was really good acting on Gilliland's part because for better or worse, no matter how we feel about JD obviously has some issues, okay? And one of them being kind of like these issues with a little bit of toxic masculinity, okay? And one thing I saw over his face is in about 3 seconds, he goes through about 12 emotions.
Yeah.
Because the first thing he does is go to hold her because he can tell that she's upset.
Rattled.
But then he looks on the bed real quickly and he sees him in that tiny robe.
You read it that way too.
I did. I think he thought something was going on, but then he realizes that he's not like
Something was going on, but not good.
right.
Yeah.
And he realizes that this dude isn't like laid up in the bed. This dude is laid out
in the bed. Yep.
And so all of those things happen and then he goes over there and that's when he's coming to.
Right.
Oh, hintsy hints.
Right. Hens comes back for a second. And JD says, "What's your dog's name?" And that's a throwback to his excuse that he gave her for his bad behavior. And he's like, "What dog? Who dog?" And JD knocks him out again with a punch. The other ladies, then, the other designing women come in to rescue her.
And that's what they say.
Right.
Which is an interesting choice of words.
In the yes, and in the deleted script we talked about from the last scene, the women had all agreed they were going to go out and save her. They see they're too late. Charlene makes one more comment about Hintz's appearance and just
oh, it's because Suzanne says he didn't look that good without his clothes on, and Charlene says, "Really?"
Yeah.
And she was like, I know, Julia, that's not the issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I rolled my eyes again, but they all turn to leave, except Julia. Julia is still behind, and they're like, "Julia, are you coming with us?" And she's writing something, and she says, "I'm just leaving Hence a note." She ends up writing a note on their business card that says, "Dear Mr. Winchester, just wanted you to know Sugar Bakers always finishes the job." And that's it.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on season 1.
Yeah. I do want to say there was another line. All of the dialogue in this episode was very well used. So it was like, it feels like every line had a really important part of the story that was telling. You know, a lot of times that's not the case. Not just here, any show. You know, there's just throwaway lines. But there's this whole exchange where they basically insinuate, "Oh, good. JD was here.
Oh.
He saved you." And she was like,
Saved myself.
Nope. Yeah. And I think that's a really important part of this because we had that groundwork laid before where we're kind of, some of that kind of hero thing is coming up where he feels like she needs some saving in the last act. And that's what I don't need to be saved. I need this guy to stop sexually harassing me. I need to be able to feed my kids. I need to be able to not have this thing chase me around everywhere I go. I need for you to support me. I don't need you to save me.
Right.
And that felt like a pretty important part of this episode.
So what was your opinion on ending on this storyline? They ended the first season on a storyline about sexual assault and harassment.
So I think like I'm. It's hard for me not to go totally cerebral because we've talked so much about these episodes being twisted up and
What do you mean?
what order are they actually going in. Oh, eh. Sometimes you're so good, I don't even see the joke is happening. But so like part of me is like, oh, what did they really mean to do, and where this would have had initially gone, and all of this. But I would just say generally, I just felt very caught off guard by this episode. It didn't help with the description. It's a sitcom. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of assumed we would have had the escalation would have been like this inappropriate hiney smacking,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't end there. We're
Right.
talking about was not harassment. This is, I mean, it is that moves into assault.
Mm-hmm.
And a near miss rape,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't think I was at all prepared for that. In terms of this being a finale, I'm mixed on it because it's a big thing that this happens. But there's, in terms of it actually being a finale and you want something to bring you into season two,
Mm-hmm.
everything again, because this is very episodic, everything's, all wrapped up. It's all done. There's nothing else left to explore, really.
Mm-hmm.
Not the way they position it. I think we know as like real life people, you don't just walk away from an incident like that and be like,
Mm-hmm.
cool.
But they will.
I think so. So I'll be curious to see how this is carried into the next season, if at all. But as to your point, probably not.
I think it is interesting to get back to what you said at the very beginning, thinking about uh, chronologically where this would have fallen. They would have been right on the bubble when this episode should have aired. Because remember, 12-13 was the first episode back. We said 10 is the one that we feel like would have preceded this. So this should have been 11. So it could have been their last episode on air. I'm curious if they felt like it was maybe too heavy of a note for that early in the season. They were already not having the greatest ratings. They were already maybe facing a little bit of criticism about the content or the structure of the show. So I wonder if they felt like it was just a little too heavy at that point. So they shelved it, went a different route with episode 11. And then after they got their footing a little later in the season, and LBT was able to say, like, no, we had that letter writing campaign. We have an audience. We have people that will watch this storyline and will understand it and see where we're going. And so I wonder if it felt like a safer toward the end of the season thing to address. It does still feel a little bit like a random season finale. Except that if these women had to go off the air, and I don't know if they knew at this point they were coming back for season 2, but if they had to end the series, I feel like that feels consistent with what LBT wanted to do with this show, is to end it on the note of strong women and pushing back on toxic masculinity, sexual harassment. And then adding to that one more point, I do think some people might have seen at that point what the show could bring, and maybe they would be curious. Well, if they can talk about rape and make me laugh, what are they going to bring in season 2? Could they do more of this? And I'm going to come back and see.
So you feel good about the choice?
No, I wouldn't say I feel good about it.
Okay.
I could see the rationale.
So I'm going to ask you a strange question. Maybe not strange. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to ask you like what you ate for dinner, strange. But like, what, if you were making the decisions on this and you were in the driver's seat, is there an episode from season 1 that you think would have fit the bill?
You know what? If I could just do whatever, but it would have required a lot of shuffling. So we're just going to
you don't
suspend.
have to. Yeah.
I haven't
suspend
written the
stuff.
whole season again.
Sure.
I might have honestly taken 12, ended on 12, to make people come back to see what happened in 13, which was Charlene's breast cancer scare. So end on that cliffhanger of what's going to happen with Charlene. Is season 2 going to resolve some of this weirdness between Mary Jo and JD? Is Anthony going to end up with 1,000 pairs of slacks? I don't know. But that might have been a nice cliffhanger to end on. It would have required a substantial amount of shuffling.
All of this
may be there.
Yeah, you don't have to work the whole. If you'll go in the other room and work this out, then come back with some storyboards.
Perfect.
Yeah, you got the time, right? You're not raising 2 children or anything. So I think mine would have been ending on Oh Susanna.
Oh, uh-huh.
but maybe have left a little ambiguity as to, apparently this is my word of the episode, but to whether or not she was going to wind up
That
being
would have
able
been good.
to have leasing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have used this episode somehow as the penultimate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I don't know how I would have bridged the two, but maybe like in the cold open, there would have been something that would have been like a little seed
Mm-hmm.
that I would have teased out in the final one. And isn't it fun to be 35 years later?
Never have written a TV show.
With 35 years worth of information on what's happened in the world. Yes, and never having written a TV show or really anything substantial. And to sit here and say what we would do.
I do think it's interesting, the thread between our two proposals is emotion. So mine was the Charlene breast cancer. Does she, doesn't she, will she survive? Yours was Suzanne's temporary foster child, and is she going to end up a mother? And I feel like those are two emotionally, and this was emotionally charged for sure, just in a different way, a different emotion. Those are almost like bittersweet, almost positive emotions, whereas this one is definitely a downer.
Yeah, because I feel like in my experience with television, a lot of times the penultimate is usually the one where those are the core shakers.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next one, we start setting up those things and placing characters on the chessboard, if you will,
Right.
so that we're
Did you just flash to Game of Thrones in your head?
so much.
I did.
So that we're primed,
Right.
you know. So
But you have a reason for coming back.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I mean, that's really what it is. I imagine it had to have been harder, though, to end on a cliffhanger in the 80s than now. Because what do I do when I'm watching Working Moms and I need to know what happens next? I just click next episode and I go straight into the next season, unless I'm all caught up, in which case I do have to keep waiting. And then I have to watch that episode again to remember what happened. So I wonder if the cliffhangers, the like feeding episodes, maybe were a little bit harder.
I think that probably is part of it. And I mean, the way that we absorb TV now and digest it is so different. The whole environment is different. But also, I just feel like we had not really gotten to the point where sitcoms were as serialized as they can be now.
Yeah.
I think that if there were ones that did that, it was very rare.
That you're making a really good point, because there actually is a show. I'm trying to remember, Tom Hanks' son, Colin Hanks.
Life in Pieces.
Life in Pieces is like that, where they sort of build this narrative over time, and you've got these threads of storylines, and it ended untimely. And it just sort of, it's not even a very clean ending. It's a little bit, like it's a little tied up in a bow, but there's so much that you wanted wrapped up before you ended it.
Oh, but did they get before?
Yes.
Okay, well that's why.
They were able to finish it out on something that felt a little bow tie-y, but not completely. And so there was a lot you wanted to see wrapped up.
So what's our cliffhanger? How are we going to get people back for another season of You and Me?
I think they're here for the ratings. I think they'll come back for the ratings, and they're going to come back for more extra sugars.
On that note, then, as you transitioned me, should we go ahead and rate this sucker?
We should. Can you go first?
I can. Was it a little hard for you to do the rating system?
There's not much to go on here. That's part of it. And the other part is I'm just not sure I'm fully committed to my rating yet.
Oh, okay. Well, so my rating scale is Scary Sex Dungeons. I don't know. Look, it took me a long time to do that because, like, I don't want to make light of this, but I think a scary sex dungeon sounds kind of funny and is also serious if you find yourself in one. So I gave it 4 out of 5 scary sex dungeons. First. I don't know what happened there.
I'm here.
I hate that Anthony wasn't in this one at all. We ended the season without my favorite character. So I think that sucks.
That does suck.
And even though I understand it's because, again, if you don't know, things were done out of order.
Right.
And he was only supposed to be here for 5 episodes. So there's stuff. But it seems counterintuitive given how all of this groundwork had been laid out over the course of the season, how protective he is over everyone. and then he's not here at all for someone almost getting sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like, but then maybe that would take away from JD. I don't
I
have
might have had a, you're raising an interesting point. I might have had a different reaction to the quote unquote saving at the end if it had been Anthony doing it. Because I think he would have done it differently.
Well, there's not all that emotion tied up in it.
Yeah.
And there's not that whole, like, kind of crap scene where we
Mm-hmm.
just saw JD be a butt.
Yeah.
We didn't see Anthony do that. We didn't see Anthony at all. That's what I'm saying. That's why you can't get a perfect score for me. For something that's 22 minutes, I think it was pretty impressive how much they were able to cover,
Mm-hmm.
which I think speaks to LBT. I don't know if you know this or not, but she's a talented lady. She has television shows, so she must be doing something right. And I think that she was very economical with the dialogue, and got really important points just really, stuffed in there. And we got a pretty good glimpse about the immediate impact that this was having on both her work and home life. For Mary Jo, I'm sorry. Sounds like I'm talking about LBT there, but I mean, I think her being able to, really we're talking about only a matter of a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing how this kind of situation can really impact everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important in terms of being able to tell a big story
Mm-hmm.
in a little space. I think you could also say that it was brave to go out on a serious topic like this,
Mm-hmm.
especially considering the times. And I think there were some important messages here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. I might come along. I'm going to go 3.75. I'm going to go with apology Braves hats.
okay.
Since we talked about the Braves last time. Everything you said. All of it. Like, I don't even really need to add that much more. Everything you said, yes, I agree with. I think there were bungles. Like, there were things that could have been better. Like, I think there was a way to get Charlene and Suzanne on the same side of this argument without Charlene making light of everything, which is what I was really seeing happen a lot. Again, like I said, that scene where every time Mary Jo expresses a way that she has been assaulted, because it went beyond harassment to assault when he started touching her. And she says, like, he's touching my chest and he's brushing himself against me. And Charlene is watching it raptly like she's watching a soap opera. And I like to think that if my best friend came to me and said these things, I wouldn't be like, girl, and what did you do to him? I wouldn't go
I'd be
that
like,
route.
I'll get my shovel.
Right.
And let's go get the car.
We ride at
Earl
midnight.
had to die.
Exactly. Exactly. So that bothered me a lot, and it's just hard to kind of move past that. I think there had to have been a way to get her on the same. She's from a small town in Missouri. It is not a far leap for me to believe that she was raised to believe men can. That's their way of being friendly.
Is that why? So I haven't heard you mention Suzanne a lot, even though Suzanne and Charlene seem to be on the same side of this. But I think that it's finally clicking for me. It's because they're best friends.
Because they're best friends.
Yeah, because Suzanne is not Mary Jo's best friend.
No.
Not by a long shot.
And Suzanne is a very different character, too. I think, and I think it's this episode when Julia says, I don't agree with this, but she says, your opinion doesn't count for much on this, Suzanne. You think being tied up for 5 days is a romantic overture.
Well, some people might think that's a romantic overture.
I think her character fits that. She and if it doesn't, again, like if you're comfortable with it and if that that's where your boundary is, cool. Have at it all day long. If your boundary is not there, and if you've set that your boundary is not there, then it's sexual harassment, then it's assault. Then you've been told. He was put on notice multiple times. There's no ambiguity about how she felt about all this. So I think Suzanne's boundaries maybe are just a little different. So for her, it made sense to me more than Charlene, who, one, is best friends with this woman who is repeatedly saying, I'm hurt. I'm hurting. Right. Something's not right. And two, Charlene is just not that character. So anyway, I have to take points off on that because I really like Charlene. All of that said, 100% agreed with everything you said. And I would totally come back to season 2 just to see what other issues, tough issues, big issues, controversial issues that they can take on, make relatively funny, but make a point that drives home. And this episode definitely made the point that toxic masculinity exists. It's a problem. Sexual assault comes in various ways. It's not black and white, which is what that missing script was so important for me. There are nuances to it, and it's not as cut and dry as being raped. There are other stages to it. So 3.75, apology Braves hats.
All right. 80s things. I'm sorry. I've never done this before. Before we get into 80s things, do you have any combination?
No.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and say it so we can just, yeah. So Atlanta National Bank.
Oh, uh-huh.
That's a reference I had to look up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Southern.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Atlanta. It is a real bank.
Oh, is that right?
And it's over in Alpharetta.
Oh, good to know.
Isn't it kind of weird that they're in Atlanta, but they're going to drive all the way over to Alpharetta to go to the bank?
A little bit.
Alpharetta is like a neighborhood outside of the city limits.
Can I ask real quick, was it around in the 80s?
I got the impression that it's
Okay.
been around a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So now we'll go to 80s things.
I have nothing.
Okay. So one of the reasons that I went back and watched this today is because I was so agitated. I had so few references.
Oh.
I thought that I was like, maybe your attention was pulled so much by the plot of this one
Yeah.
that I missed some things. So, but we've mentioned this before. It may have even been on the last episode about hints, but the waterbed.
Oh.
It's deeply 80.
Yeah.
Pulling ads from a magazine. That's how there was this whole conversation about. That's why he wanted to do the jacuzzi tub.
Oh.
Also, jacuzzi tubs.
Yeah.
That's pretty 80s. I'm not saying they don't have them now. I'm just saying I think that's when they were invented. Could be wrong. I don't know. Someone berate me over it. I'll come back here. I'll cry. I won't cry, but I will apologize. And then so many landlines is what's in my notes.
Oh.
There's just a lot of them.
Oh.
And it's all those like manila colored
Oh,
phones.
yeah.
Why were they like, you know
80s
what'll
beige.
be beautiful
80s
is
beige.
some manila.
Right.
It's the worst color.
It's neutral.
Sure.
Nice neutral.
It just, yeah, if you really want something to not fade in the background, make it manila. So Southern things.
Calling a toilet a commode. Julia did
Oh.
that at what my grandmother used to call the toilet a commode.
Yeah, so does mine. There you go.
I don't know where it comes from.
Sorry.
We'll probably report back at some point.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that my voice got really high there, so I apologize. I feel like that was painful to the listener.
I mentioned this earlier, Fort Benning from the cutscene. Fort Benning is a U.S. Army post that's on the Alabama-Georgia border.
I like the commitment to looking up a cut Southern.
I know.
That's good.
Well, I had a friend whose husband was stationed at Fort Benning, so it has a special place in my heart.
So is that all your references? Mm-hmm. Atlanta Braves hats.
Oh, uh-huh.
Saying to fix them some drinks.
Oh,
That's what
good
Hint
one.
said.
Good one, good one.
I know that's something that I have read on multiple lists that blows my mind every time that confuses people. But
'Cause
if you're
you just
not from
say it.
around here, what do you mean you're fixing it? Like it was broken.
Right.
That's what it sounds
Just
like.
fixing it, man.
He'd be a heel to sleep with Mary Jo now. Something about being a heel. I don't know. That just felt very Southern.
That
to me.
feels 40s to me. It just feels like I heard it in like an old-timey movie.
Say, yeah.
When you're not allowed to say a-hole. I'm a heel.
That's good. But isn't it all related?
It was also said in Home Alone
Oh, really?
2 when they're going to Paris.
Uh-huh.
Was that 2 or was that 1? 2.
2.
1. 1 was Paris,
Oh.
right? Yeah.
Okay,
1
yeah,
was
sure.
Paris. She says, "Don't you feel like a heel being here in first class while all the kids are stuck in coach?"
Nope.
That's pretty much what happened.
Also, like, I don't know rich people that go to Paris for, I don't even want to talk. I can't.
can't.
I can't, Nikki.
I can't.
References that I had to look up or you had to look up or we need to talk about. What you got?
Vichyssoise. That is the soup that she says she's making with duck à l'orange. So that's one of those frou-frou foods that I've heard of, but I don't actually know what it is. Turns out it's a cold soup made of pureed leeks, onions, potatoes, cream, and chicken stock that was invented in America in 1917 and named after the French town of Vichy. Let me clarify. I just don't like cold soup. So all those
Oh, really?
ingredients, like that would make a delicious warm soup. I love a good potato soup.
Why'd it have to be cold?
Why you gotta make it cold?
Okay. Good look up because it also sounded familiar to me. I was like, is that sausage? You made a face to leeks. You don't like leeks?
It was, it's a delayed reference to cold soup.
Oh, okay.
Is what it
That's
was.
I like it, but I like it to be like, I just need like a little taster. I don't need like a whole bowl of it.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes they can be kind of delicious, but I hear you. I'm glad it wasn't on the leeks though, because leeks are tasty.
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with leeks guess what?
At least you're cool by me.
Nikki says you can exist.
I'm not sitting here eating you raw, but you can exist. You're cool.
Moving on. Sleeping single in a double bed was on my list.
Oh, yeah.
But you caught it at the beginning. So
Yeah.
Barbara Mandrell. But I thought that was such a nice callback to your
Yeah.
extra sugar.
Yeah.
Into the episode, because they do mention them
Yes.
within the course of the episode.
Right.
And I jumped right in there. I'm sorry.
That was it.
That was
You're
all?
fine.
Okay. I'm just doing whatever I want. Here is one that I feel silly that I had to look up, because I just always, this is one of those things that I sort of just always sorted in my head to rich people stuff I don't care about.
Oh, uh-huh.
Club Med.
Oh,
So
I'm familiar with Club Med.
well, I was today years old when I do you participate?
No, no.
I love Club Med. Go on.
And actually, you may know something different about it than I'm familiar with, but I just was curious, planning a vacation at some point, probably our 10th wedding anniversary, which, thank you, COVID, was supposed to be really wonderful and was not. We ended up canceling our trip, but I looked at Club Med because everybody says how wonderful they are. In fact, I think I might have a friend who stayed at one, and they get a butler with every room or something.
Sounds like sandals.
So, right. So I looked it up in that context, but what'd you find?
And that's what it is. They're all-inclusive resorts, and they're all around the world. And I think Sandals is similar to this. Is like you have like, I always think of Couples Retreat with Vince Vaughn. You know, where you've got like the party island, you got the family island. So you've got the couples kind of thing. So it seems like
the topless beaches.
That's where I'm gonna be.
I'm telling you, the adults only beaches, because we've been to an adults only resort, which always sounded super. It does. It sounds like a sex resort when you say adults only. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
The adults only beach is the topless beach. If you're not comfortable topless, don't go there.
Well,
Not comfortable topless. If you're not comfortable with topless.
We'll have to do an extra sugar on this, because I could just go on and on. We should put it in with the bra one. Anyways, so I think I must be about the club part too, but I'm always associating with country clubs, rich people.
Oh,
I don't know. But anyway, so I learned today that it's these kind of luxury resorts, all inclusive. So I don't know why I was always making a thing of it in my head, but I almost
It's a
picture
weird name.
I almost picture people like they're playing tennis when they're talking about it.
Oh.
So that's just where it's at in my brain. We got another Gaddafi mention in this one, which is funny because I was catching up. Just maybe I listened to an old episode and heard you, like you've already pointed out this reference before, so we don't have to talk about him again. It's just funny that they talked about him in New Year's Day episode 11, and it's funny we're hearing about him again.
Is it though?
No, not funny like I'm going to laugh.
Well, no, I was going to say, should we cover how these episodes aired out of order, and it's possible this episode should have been back?
The other thing is that I think he was probably in the news a lot when LBT was writing. I think we've talked before. She was with this show, and I am assuming in real life it's probably a little bit of a current events junkie. The U.S. in 87 retaliated with airstrikes after Libyan agents bombed a West Berlin nightclub that killed 3 people, including a U.S. serviceman. I am guessing this was in the news like crazy at the time. So I think this was just finding its way into her writing for these kind of like one-liners. So there you go with my last one.
That's it?
That's it.
So that's a wrap. Season 1 of Designing Women.
That's it.
And season 1 of the Sweet Tea and TV podcast. This has been a lot of fun for us.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge.
Yeah.
We've lost sleep.
Yes.
And tempers. Not at each other.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Technology has probably gotten the brunt of my
It's been a real struggle sometimes. We've lost a lot of free time, but it's been a real passion project, I think, for both of us. There have been times where I think we've had to take a breather and just calm down because technology has been a struggle. We're learning a lot as we go. But in general, thank you to everyone who's listening for following along with every Selena's sidebar, Nikki's nibbles, extra sugar. We're actually recording this episode quite a bit before it's actually going to air. So we, Selena and me, are taking a break. We're going to take a couple weeks off, whoop, whoop, catch our breaths, and then regroup for season 2. In the meantime, we're planning to pop back in after this episode airs with a season 1 in review of some kind. It's still TBD, still up in the air. We think we know what we want to do with it. But we really want to take a look back at everything we've done and learned together over the last 22-ish weeks. It's been a real slow burn, half a year. So if you're listening in real time, we're going to come back next week with something fun that won't affect you at all. If you're listening after these episodes have already aired, so you're just kind of catching up on everything, just keep a binging. Something fun's going to pop up next. So thank you,
Aw,
Selena.
thank you.
Thank you, audience. Thank you, Selena Mama and Aunt Teresa and Tammy and Selena's friends who have been listening. Thank you for listening, for sharing your thoughts and opinions. Do you want to say anything, Selena, before we wrap up?
Oh, now you tell me you want me to speak.
You can speak anytime you want. You know that.
Oh, yeah. I feel like someone who won an Oscar. And
You can
forgot to
also just say
prepare one.
thank you because we're going to come back again next week.
Well, I do want to say thank you, and I think it's true. It has been exhausting, but in the most wonderful and fabulous way. We've been able to be creative. We've been able to, but let's not lie. You and I both love to research stupid stuff,
I'm always on Wikipedia, so why not do it for the show?
and that's all. That's all I've done. Morning, noon, and night. I'm just Googling. As Nikki would die to hear me say, my Google hand is very tired.
Back with the Google hand.
Yeah, so that's why I'll be resting it. Woo. So
Thank you. Continue to follow along and engage with us. Instagram and Facebook at Sweet Tea and TV. Email sweetteatvpod@gmail.com. www.sweetteatv.com. And I'm going to put in a special plug here. If you have thoughts for season 2, if you have something you really, really loved this season, something you really didn't love so much, send us a quick DM, email us. No promises we're going to listen to you, but we'd love to hear what you have to say.
we'll listen to you.
I really hope you didn't hate anything, but really, if you did, we want to know. We want to make sure we're not doing something annoying every week. We're doing the best we can with audio quality, and it's getting better. But those things we can't change. What we can change, if we're so inclined, is if there is something that's just not really working for you. But so we'd love to hear. If you have cool ideas for season 2, let us know.
God, yes.
If you know LBT, if you know Annie Potts, and you want to hear them on this show, you're welcome to connect us. We would love to talk to them.
I mean, it would be Annie Potts. Come on.
Be a darn dream. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Stick around for extra sugar. What you got this week, Selena?
This week, it's going to be a serious one. So it's hard to make light, and we shouldn't, of sexual harassment and assault. And we're going to do a little bit of a tie-in with this particular episode because, after all, we are a TV review podcast. If you feel so inclined to stick around, we'll see you then. And one last time, for those in the cheap seats, see you around the bend. Bye. Welcome to this week's Extra Sugar, our final installment for season 1 of Designing Women.
Oh.
Yep. It's the last one. The final hurrah. Okay. But seriously.
I was trying to think of something. The last dance.
The last dance. That's good.
Save it for me.
Okay. So this one's going to be pretty serious. So I think that's also probably Nikki and I just shaking off some of the tenseness before we jump into.
I know. I feel like that was your get your act together, Nikki warning.
Well, actually, this is another warning for the audience. If for any reason you're just a huge Extra Sugar fan and that's all you tune in for, then I just want everyone to hear that much like the episode itself, we will be discussing sexual harassment and assault. So if for any reason this might be triggering for you, we suggest that you stop here. It's not that we don't want you here, but we were really thinking about you, and join us next time. More than anything, we want to be sensitive to this topic and not assume that this lesson is for everyone. That said, if you're hanging here with us, the very first thing I want to do is share a few quick facts on sexual assault. So, according to CDC, more than 1 in 3 women and nearly 1 in 4 men experience sexual violence involving physical contact during their lifetime. I am specifically mentioning men because we've talked a lot about women.
Right.
And too often men are left out of this conversation.
Yeah.
So sexual harassment, sexual assault, all of these things happen to people.
Right.
It is not something that belongs to us.
Right.
And we don't want it. So
There's
easy
that.
enough. Yeah. Maybe this is common knowledge, but just in case, roughly 80% of people know their attacker. And while anyone can be sexually assaulted, some groups are more affected. So, notably, younger people aged 18 to 34, communities of color, and communities or the LGBT community. So, I also want to remind everyone how embedded sexual violence has historically been in our culture. This like absolutely blew my mind the very first time I heard it, which was when I was in college, and that's the fact that marital rape was not illegal in all 50 states until 1993.
Holy moly.
Okay, so you didn't know that.
No.
Okay, so just let that sink in. Even worse, the idea of rape, as we think of it today, is fairly modern. This is not something that has just always been like
Right.
this known thing. So, not because it didn't exist, and not because it wasn't happening, but because it was just a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
And now I am talking over the span of history, so that's a long time. But at one point in history, it was actually a property crime. So do what you will with that.
Oh my.
If you have questions along the way, you can ask. Okay. So, um, we could go down a lot of rabbit holes, and you and I are really good about that anyway. So I was like really trying to think, like, oh, I got to find a way to focus this. I wound up running across an article that I think we can use to focus the conversation. And that way we can talk about things within the context of this episode of Designing Women. But I just want to pause real quick, and I want to ask you, Nikki, did you feel like this episode's portrayal of sexual harassment and assault was realistic? And then an addendum to that is, what do you think worked and what do you think didn't work?
Okay. I feel like it was fairly realistic in the way that they positioned how challenging it could be, not in every instance, but it can be for the person who is being sexually assaulted or harassed. It's difficult at the beginning when you're sort of wondering, is that what's really happening here? Is that a red flag? Was that a boundary he blew past? Or am I imagining it? That kind of self-doubt, I feel like, feels realistic to how I've heard that that sexual assault and harassment can work. I feel like the difficult challenges that she faced, the power imbalance, which we talk about a lot. So this was a contractor who had the ability to get a lot of business. So Mary Jo was sort of like, we can't afford to lose this. So I'm going to continue to put myself out there so that we can keep his business and keep him happy. I think that's how a lot of aggressors work. They have something over your head. They have something that holds you on the hook.
Yes.
I feel like that part of things was realistic. I feel like the other vantage points that Suzanne and Charlene brought to the table, that's just his way of being social. I feel like that's realistic. I feel like there is if you're not in it, there can be a perception that that is normal behavior. That's acceptable behavior. You said it in the episode, boys will be boys. I think that's true. I'm glad that the end of the episode ended with Mary Jo reclaiming the power the way she did by knocking him out. I don't know that that's super realistic. I don't know if that always can happen for people. But I'm glad it did, because if you're going to show a scenario on TV, let it be the best case scenario and the empowering scenario. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I feel like it was pretty realistic. There were things I would have changed. It's a tall order to put that in a comedy. I get that. But the laugh tracks that were ill-placed. Mary Jo's skirt being ripped wide open and people laughing. Charlene making light of it. Those things felt unusual to me. And I didn't care for that. But I think some of the other things played really well.
Okay. I just thought some of that general framing would be helpful before we jump into, again, this article that I ran across. And we'll link to this, but it basically discusses like the worst tropes associated with sexual assault portrayals. And so I thought what we could do is discuss whether Designing Women upheld or overcame a trope.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you what the trope is, and then I'm going to ask you, overcame or upheld.
Okay.
All right. So the first one is the trope of no means yes. Right off the bat, this article gives a Gone with the Wind reference, a Southern reference, as something where the narrative romanticizes sexual assault. And this refers to female characters resisting a male character's sexual advances only to eventually give in and enthusiastically reciprocate. Okay. Love the way I pronounce that word. Not important. Moving on. So, thoughts?
That's the last thing I said when you asked me about the episode. Totally overcame it because she reclaimed her power at the end. She stuck to her guns and said, like, I'm not into you. No means no. Not no means yes.
I should say that a lot of your answer might kind of, to my question, is probably going to feed into some of these tropes.
Okay.
But
I hope in a good way. Actually, as you were describing what you want me to do here, I was like, oh my God, what if everything I said was the thing they say don't do?
No, I think some of it is like, you weren't naming the puppy. We're probably going to be naming the puppy now. So,
There are puppies involved?
I really hope not. Poor puppies. All right. So, yeah, this absolutely did not happen. So I think she stood up to him at every turn. She fought back. And I said this in the episode, but again, I think her being like, you are a rapist.
Yeah.
I closed my eyes when I said that to Nikki.
Because you didn't want to look at me and say it.
That is absolutely true. So I thought that was so pointed, pointing out the thing about like, just because you're good looking doesn't make this okay. Because I do think there's a lot. I really think that feeds into a lot of this, how someone looks. I also think you could have two different people deliver the same message, and someone else might take it two separate ways.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this is a very nuanced topic. Moving on to number 2, rape as a plot device. There's a couple of examples I want to give, but let's start with number 1. As a plot device where you take a strong female character and then you take them down a peg or two and you make them show some vulnerability. You mentioned Game of Thrones. Wonderful tie-in there. I mean, not wonderful, but good that you mentioned it because that would be the example here. Jaime's rape of Cersei on Game of Thrones. So this was meant to show her vulnerability. She had been like this really tough character. She doesn't need anybody, she's very strong. And then we just sort of use that as a way to be like, but she's still a woman.
Right.
So thoughts on that? Upheld, overcame.
That's an interesting one because Mary Jo is not a particularly strong character. I actually think her backbone grew in this episode. She tends to be, we learned in Seams of a Marriage, that people perceive her as the pleaser. And I was floored that she is what happened in this episode is not what I expected, which is why I was surprised so many times because I fully was prepared. I didn't expect it, but I was prepared that they might have her give in some way. They certainly weren't going to have them have sex on TV, but like for her to be vulnerable in a way that she says like, oh my God, this is totally my fault. I have come in here with this button down skirt that makes you think easy access. Like I fully expected her to apologize to him. So I think her backbone grew in this episode. So I think it overcame that trope.
I totally agree with you. And absolutely. I think this storyline shows her strength. Because the best we've gotten is in terms of her being, strength is such an interesting concept anyway. She's obviously already strong in a number of ways. I mean, she's raising kids on her own. She's a successful career person. She's, it seems like she's dealing with a lot in her life at the glimpses that we've gotten. And so not to say that, but again, this meekness keeps getting, this people-pleasing aspect keeps getting brought to the surface.
Right.
And this insecurity. And so I think that this storyline really brought out something different in her. And she also tells JD straight up she doesn't need his saving. We've talked about that, but feels very relative to this point right here. Even before the last really kicker scene, she doesn't give in to JD's ultimatum.
Yeah.
She's, not going to give up her money, her job. This is something that she feels like she needs to do. And then she kicks Hence's butt.
Yeah.
I do agree with what you're saying. We don't know that's always the case. Also, she's a very tiny lady.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is some physicality to it.
I mean, he straight up picked her up.
Yeah, like a sack of potatoes.
Yeah.
The other plot device I wanted to mention, even though this article specifically didn't speak to it, but is this idea of using attacks on girlfriends wives or daughters as like a way to motivate the male protagonist. So I'll give you an example. Have you
Okay.
ever seen Con Air? Ah, crap. Okay, so the whole thing starts off with this idea that he goes to jail. Nicolas Cage, he's a good guy. That's what you need to know. He's a good guy. They needed a reason for him to wind up with all of these convicts in
Right.
jail, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so at the very beginning of the movie, his wife is getting harassed by men in a parking lot, and they go to do something to her
Oh.
of a sexual assault nature.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a very trained professional, like military person.
Mm-hmm.
And not only does he get them, he accidentally kills the guy.
Okay.
And they send him to jail for that.
Okay.
So that whole thing about a potential attack on his wife sets off this chain of events for the entire movie.
Okay.
And that's what I mean by that. Like
Okay.
you need this horrible thing to happen to get this to basically start a man's plot, and then we focus on the man for the rest of the time.
Okay.
So that's this other trope.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, overcome that trope in this one, or succumb. I changed my words, but you know what I mean.
I think it overcame it because it had nothing to do with. We talk about JD a little bit and where he sits in all this and what his baggage is with it. But it wasn't about him. It was about her. So I think it overcame it.
Yeah, I agree. I think LBT really flips the script because he keeps trying to save her.
Right.
And she keeps saying, I don't need you to save me.
Right.
She literally says it, then she literally does it.
Right.
He feels the need to knock him out again, but he didn't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. And the guy deserved to get punched. I'd have liked to have punched him. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, it wasn't well landed.
Right.
It's just that it wasn't ever about him.
Yeah.
It was about Mary Jo.
Right.
Which I think is really important. I said this again in the episode, but this just really is a stick point for me. She needed support, not saving.
Yeah.
I think that was my annoyance with JD most of the time.
Yeah.
He wanted to put on a cape. He didn't want to just hold her.
I think that gets at, again, concept of toxic masculinity. It is a buzzword now. We didn't know what to call it back then. But that's the idea,
Right.
is just because you're a man doesn't mean that you have to save a woman.
I think we called it primetime TV.
Right.
Last trope.
Okay.
The victim who falls for their rapist.
Oh.
Orange is the New Black. I think you watched a little bit and you had to check
It wasn't
out.
for me.
Yeah, but it's a little bit of a rough watch.
Yeah.
So there's a few different examples of this prison guard inmate relationship kind of deal, and so where like initially something starts out and it's not appropriate, but then it turns into a relationship or whatever the case is, and so this is something that has commonly happened in different television programs. They mentioned a soap opera. I think this one's a little bit clearer. So in the soap opera, this is in the 80s. I think it's in the 80s. Anyways, a man rapes a woman, and then eventually they get married on the show. There's a long story behind it.
Well, sure. Probably lasted about 10 years.
But you see, that's a very nail on the head.
Right.
Okay. So overcame. What?
Overcome, succumb.
Thank you. I'm just saying words now.
Overcome. She definitely, you pointed it out in the episode itself where you said that she said, just because you look like Robert Redford doesn't mean, I'm into you or whatever. Doesn't mean you can do this. Yeah, no, she didn't give in to him in any way. She didn't find her. I think she was just increasingly repulsed by him, honestly. And it wasn't so, it wasn't like the more that he did this, the more weirdly attracted she was. And not weirdly, that sounds judgmental. The more attracted she found herself to him. It wasn't like that at all. She was increasingly repulsed by him.
You know what I think? I think some of that has to do with he's a little bit of a Ted, her ex-husband.
Oh, really?
Well, what I mean by that is like a frequency of women. An amount. So I think that probably is still a trigger for her.
That's a good point.
And so because to this point, like we're just at the chest pointing and is he brushing up against, is this in my head? He's making her feel crazy is what it is, which is messed up on its own. Okay.
Well, and one thing to add there, which I'm not sure it's well placed here, but one thing that struck me that I probably should have mentioned in the episode is an insecurity of hers, where she says, he's got all these other women. Why would he bother me?
Yes.
And I think that is something that plays into how you perceive a sexual advance.
You're lucky you're not misplaced. I would have just told you to hit the door.
I know. You just kicked me out.
Yeah,
Slam
just
my computer shut.
Get out. No, I think that's a great point. And it's really sad,
Yeah.
honestly. Okay, so that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
That means it overcame these 3 really big tropes, at least from our opinion. There might be
3 for 3.
someone out there who is like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
This and this and this and this. And they're entitled to their opinion.
They're wrong, but they're entitled to their opinion.
You heard it from
Just
Nikki,
kidding.
not from me. I don't know what to
kidding.
tell you. So I wanted to mention one other upside because, I did a lot of different research into, this portrayal on TV and the history of it and everything. And something that I think is being corrected now, but I actually think is another upside in this issue, is it's centered on Mary Jo, at least in my opinion. It wasn't centered on hints. So we had that focus on the survivor. And, we see Mary Jo's side of things. We talked about this in the episode, so I feel like I just said it. But again, I want to reiterate. We see her break the news to her coworkers and her friends. We see her go through what she does with JD in the middle of the episode. And even that final scene is really from her vantage point, because I think I feel her emotions in that.
Yes.
I don't feel anything from him.
No, not at all. We talked a lot about how it ping-pongs around. Everything happens so fast, and I think that's what happens. It happens so fast.
And one thing I didn't mention in the episode is she does some really good where I see her wheels turning. As soon as when she realizes she's not getting out that door without a fight, she is making an exit strategy.
Right.
So I think it probably doesn't hurt that this was written by a woman.
Yeah.
Because again, not to say that men don't go through a thing, but to say that if we are talking about a woman's story
perspective
written by a woman,
Right.
it feels really, really helpful in this case. It is not perfect. And we talked about this in the episode too. I think this is a flaw of a lot of sitcoms. I think this is a flaw of a 22-minute anything, is that we don't discuss the aftermath.
Right.
Unless they do, which we don't think they will.
Right. I think they're going to move on.
Come back. We'll see. But yeah, I think we're probably fallen into that common trap of tying everything up in a neat 22-minute package. But, the reality is that many survivors face long-term effects.
Well, can I also add that she wasn't actually raped? And I think sometimes there is a perception that if it's not rape, then you're not impacted. Like
Right.
you didn't experience that physical aspect of things. But there's a perception that if it's not rape, it's not that serious. I think that perception is changing, but sexual assault and sexual harassment can have mental effects. It can, make you insecure around certain people. It can make you feel like you have to approach certain situations so carefully and strategically and know your exit strategy when you're in a room. I'm only going to speak from a female perspective, but when you're in a room with a man alone, you're making sure you know where the exit is. You're making sure you know where those boundaries are. And it doesn't have to be rape for there to be long-standing effects.
And we had an off-mic conversation about this because this is something where I think there is a difference in my experience and from my perspective between being a man and a woman. And that is, as a woman, my whole life, I feel like it has been instilled in me either by my mother or by society at large. You could get raped at any time.
At any time.
And I know that there's going to
corner.
be there's going to be two reactions to that statement.
Yeah.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? And yep, absolutely.
Right.
And probably nothing in between.
Yeah.
And so that is just like, what you're saying, you walk into a room, you're sizing the room up. I feel like men do that too, but it's like
for a different reason.
For a fight or to make sure they're protecting themselves and everybody else for some reason. But for women, it's like, I don't want to be the victim today.
Today's not that day.
Right. I just want to drink a coffee.
Right.
And maybe flip through a magazine on my phone.
Yep.
So I just think that is a different experience and something worth mentioning. to the point about the landscape of then and now, I do think that we are getting these more nuanced portrayals. So I've got an article that we'll link to as well that talks to some of these shows. I've seen some of these shows. I do agree. I think they are talking about the aftermath. I think they are talking about the mental health issues. I think they are talking about the anguish. And it looks different on everyone because we're all different. So I think that's really important. And there was I had the quote in here and I took it out, but there was a showrunner and she basically said, like, don't do it to be gratuitous.
Right.
But sometimes it can be a really powerful tool to show rape. And so if you have, that's not how she put it, but,
Right.
or sexual assault or what, however you want to classify. But like, if it is if it's reasonable and if there's a powerful purpose behind it, then it might be worth it. And in this case, I think there was a really powerful purpose behind it. So I do think it was worth it. I don't think it was gratuitous.
No.
So I do think it actually might be a place where a sitcom serves. Because it's not supposed to be gritty.
Right.
This isn't HBO. It's not Showtime. It's CBS.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can have this conversation without at least mentioning the Me Too movement. To say a couple of things. We have talked about it before on this podcast, but I don't want to assume that everyone knows what it is. Me Too is a movement of survivors and their supporters that is determined to end sexual violence and harassment. Stuff gets politicized. But we're not really talking about that today. We're just saying, like, the purpose is to end these things that we saw in this show, and that we talked about today. I also just want to say that while most Americans first heard about it in 2017, it's really something that was started a decade earlier by a grassroots activist, Tarana Burke, who was helping young women talk about sexual assault. I believe it's because she had been assaulted as well. She just wanted to make sure that these women and girls were experiencing the empathy that they needed. And while Me Too ripped through Hollywood, this is not a Hollywood problem, it's an everywhere problem. There's a really good Vox article, we'll link to that too. It breaks down some of the good changes that have come about due to Me Too. This is protections for workers, not letting people hide their behaviors behind non-disclosure agreements. This turd is someone who probably had an assistant with a non-disclosure agreement, some sort of Harvey Weinstein situation. It wouldn't shock me in the least. But here's perhaps one of the most important changes the article refers to. It mentions again, and we talked about it several times, so I'm not going to, even within the course of this episode, so I'm not going to go too far of it or into it, but it's that it shifted the way Americans think about power. It opened our eyes, or some people's eyes. And we've talked about those power imbalances today. So again, just going to leave that there. It also just made us start talking about it. Openly, because you have to drag these things into a light. Because if you don't drag it into the light, it's like a virus, and it just keeps growing, and it gets worse. So I just wanted to say that I think those are some really important things that have come about in recent years, and just to remind, I don't know, myself, whoever needs the reminding, that this is not something that's gone away. It is here today. But hopefully we'll continue to find some changes. I've got some wrap-up thoughts, but I just wanted to pause for a minute. Not trying to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you wanted to ask me or anything that is percolating for you?
A lot, but no, I think the way you approached this segment was so helpful. And I think sometimes we tell ourselves as we're doing this podcast, like, I know we're overthinking this. It's just a comedy. It's just a few minutes. But the way that you position that, and it's making me look at these situations in a different way in entertainment. We acknowledge that, and this is why we dig in so deep, because entertainment has such an immeasurable impact on culture and on society. It may take time. This was a show that aired in 1987. You said the Me Too movement started in 2007 in its grassroots form. I know that there was feminism. I know these conversations were happening before that, but other than
no,
right. So, but other than terrifying us and making us afraid of rape, and then telling us at the same time, but don't talk about it. If it happens to you, don't tell people about it. That's tacky. It's been this slow, incremental movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're making me look at television shows and movies and things I've seen, Lifetime movies I've seen about rape
Oh
in a
boy.
totally different way. And I think looking at the way they positioned it and seeing did they take the easy way out, or did they do what LBT did here and flip the script and make it something that hadn't really been done in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that. I think that was really helpful.
Well, yeah.
Of course.
Oh, okay. Because I'm sputtering now. I don't take compliments well. So
She's like blushing too.
I'm like, that's a really good segue, because the other thing I wanted to say is, it's been a little disappointing for us, unfortunately, because this show that in its own time was a progressive show, it's accumulated a little dust.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a hit on Designing Women. That's called the passage of time.
Right.
So, while this may have not been perfect, and maybe it was a strange finale for a sitcom, my parting thought is that it's heartening to see the season wrap with something that feels like it stood the test of time. So from that vantage point, and again, like what we came in this to do, to look at things and to say, how does this shake out in 2021?
Mm-hmm.
That feels like a pretty good foot to step out the door with.
Yeah.
As we go take our well-needed breaks so we can mow our lawns and do our dishes.
Brush our teeth.
It's going to be a great time. So, because it's been so long since this aired, I think this shows how radically ahead of its time it really was.
Yeah.
So, thank you, LBT,
Mm-hmm.
for being able to be so ahead of your time. And I have a sneaking suspicion this helped some people back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one more thing, and then we're going to cut it. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual violence, it is not your fault. You are not alone, and help is available 24/7 through the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 4673. You can also find this resource at online.rainn, both of those N's are in November.org. And thank you for joining us for our final segment of Season 1 for Extra Sugar.